friend, Kara Patman, and we're a little bit late because I was trying to find Where Treetops Glisten, one of the books we wrote together. It's gone from my keeper shelf. I have a shelf in my living room that has all my books. I'm like, it's not here. So I'm looking other places. I bet it's in one of my kids' rooms, which is a good sign, huh, Kara?
It is. And it's really funny because our daughter, who just turned 12, has just in the last couple of weeks discovered my books. And so she's been reading the Flight Risk and all the Justice books. But fortunately, she went and grabbed her own from my stash downstairs. And she's like, these are mine. You can't take them. I'm like, that's good. As long as you leave me mine, we're all okay.
Yeah, it's so funny because I'm like, oh, it's so funny because once I was in the car and one of my kids, I started laughing because she got into my keeper shelf and she grabbed Mom's Side Out, but it was in German. So I was laughing at her because she took it for one of our car rides somewhere. And I'm like, you're not going to be able to get very far in that book. And you're not supposed to take books off my shelf.
And if you can get very far in German, hats off to you.
There you go.
How funny.
Oh, well, we just jumped in. If you are here, you can ask questions. We can see them in the comments. We can't see your name. We could just see Facebook user, but later we can go back and say hey to whoever it is. We're going to be talking about flight risk today, which I'm super excited about. But Kara, just start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am an attorney who teaches at Purdue University. I was a homeschooling mom, not as long as you have been, but I did it for 12 years. And we met through ACSW, but about the time I started writing, because I started, you'd ask for an opinion, and I'd be like, I have opinions. So with your Generation X parenting and marriage books.
Yes.
But my first book came out in 2007, and it was a World War II. And Flight Risk, which just came out last month, is book number 34, I believe.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah, I'm almost as prolific as you are. Not quite, but
you're
almost.
Getting there. Yeah, you're getting there. Okay, so you mentioned ACSW, and some people might say, what are you talking about? We always talk in these acronyms, so go ahead and explain a little bit about ACSW.
So ACSW is American Christian Fiction Writers, and it's the organization for folks who want to focus specifically on Christian fiction. Mm-hmm. And so we have a conference every year. We have chapters scattered around the country. I think you've got one in Little Rock.
Yep.
So very close to where Tricia is. There's one in Indiana. They're scattered all over the country. And we even have one for what we call Beyond the Borders for our members who are in other places like Australia and Europe and wherever they are. But we focus on providing support because writing's lonely. It's a very solitary type of business, but then also a lot of training. So Tricia and I have co-taught continuing ed sessions and things like that at conference. And stay tuned because this year we're going online like so many people are, but we just had a board meeting on Saturday. So there will be all kinds of exciting things rolling out in the next couple weeks. Yeah. So it's not, our preference is always to be face-to-face, but just with the way things are going this year, we decided to go ahead and call it. We're moving online. And then next year we'll be in New Orleans. And in 2022, we'll be back in St. Louis.
Oh, good. Yeah. And it's so hard to figure those things out. I know a lot of the conferences, homeschool conferences that I was speaking at, they've had to go online or just postpone it. Mount Hermon, I was supposed to speak at Mount Hermon this year, which is another Christian writers conference, a small one for both fiction and nonfiction. And they just postponed. They canceled this year. We're going to be next year. But it is hard. And it's so true that the writing is it can be lonely. It can be solitary. And that's why I think you and I have connected because we enjoy doing it together.
Well, and it's just been one of those really fun God, relationships, which I'm so grateful for. Because even in January, when the two of us just kind of happened to be at the American Library Association meeting together, and it was just so wonderful and refreshing to get to spend that couple of days with you. And because I think you may be a little more introverted than I am, but we both love people. Yeah. And so it's so wonderful to be able to have those connections where you can just really come alongside, but then also be able to write together.
Yeah. And we didn't even know that we were each going to be there at the librarians convention.
I know.
And we're like, what?
Yeah, that's the beauty of Facebook, because I think I saw that you were getting on a plane and I was already there. And it's like, what? This is too cool.
Yeah.
So. And then it just worked out great that we got to keep hanging out.
Yeah, it was so fun. Okay, so we are going to talk about flight risk, but since you mentioned the books we've written together, so we've was the Amish one the first one we've done? No, the Sugarcreek.
Actually, I think it was Where Treetops Glisten.
Okay. So hold that one up. So this is with Sarah Sundin, Sarah, and Tricia. And so we each wrote a novella centered around World War II Christmas, which is such a fun time. And I'm telling you, with the two of you and your brains together, it was just made it so easy. I'm like, oh, you guys have done like a lot of the work for me. These are the characters. This is what's going on. I'm like, okay, I could do this.
Well, and it was so fun because I like to think I'm organized, but Sarah Sundin is a pharmacist by training. And so she is the spreadsheet queen.
Yeah.
And every time I was like, I'm organized, I've got all my stuff together, she'd pop in with a spreadsheet and be like, I am so unorganized. But it made it so much fun. And because we all write World War II, it was just a joy to come together. And I still think we need to do another one. I think that would just be so much fun.
I would love it. And we all got a visit because explain the setting and kind of some of the things. We got to go to the candy shop. I mean, just so many fun things. Yeah.
So it was really fun because we'd gotten together and been like, hey, wouldn't it be fun to write kind of a novella collection? And we got on a phone call as we were going, okay, what are our readers all going to expect from us? Because whenever we write a book, we're making a promise to the readers. Mm-hmm. And there reaches a point where, if you read a Tricia Goyer book, it's going to have these type of characteristics. And if it's a Kara Putman, it'll look like this. And then if it's a Sarah Sundin, it'll have these elements. So we were on a conference call going, okay, what are those elements that we all need or that our readers are just going to expect? And it was so fun because I'm just sitting there in my office listening to the two of you, and I just started laughing because you were talking about, well, it should be kind of a small town, not too far from a major city, but not a major city, and it should probably have some industry and maybe like a university feel. And I just was like, you're talking about the city I live in.
Yeah.
And so we ended up setting it in Lafayette, Indiana. And even on that conference call, Sarah's doing all these Google searches. There was a puzzle company there, and there was this, and there was that. And and thanks. So was popped on. I really liked Where Treetops Glistens. And it was just so much fun because we had so much fun as a group of authors. And so I think that came through. And Sarah got to come to town. I think she was coming before conference when it was in Indianapolis one year. And then you came later because you were speaking at the Crisis Pregnancy Center my husband's involved in. And so it was really fun because I was like, my friend's house is where the siblings are going to live, because it ended up being a series of sibling stories. And so Anne took us through her house, and it's this charming little kind of Victorian near downtown. And then my heroine had to work at McCord's, which is this great little candy shop downtown. And so we were able to pull in all these different aspects, and it just was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we went to antique shops. It was your hometown. Yes. So we went to antique shops. Let me grab the thing real quick. Okay, so my book is set. My book is partly in the U.S., but in Belgium. And
during the Battle of the Bulge,
when we were there at an antique shop, I found this, and it was a division that fought in World War II in Belgium. It was the Stratton tropen, and it was there, and I'm like, this is exactly. It was just like, how would you ever find that in an antique shop in Indiana? And it was like perfect. So it was just like a confirmation that we were on the right track.
I know, and it was.
Keep it right here on my bookshelf.
Oh, that's so fun. And that's what was really kind of special about it as well, is you both got to come to my town and you got to see, and I'll never forget, Sarah and I were kind of driving around because she's like, okay, where's my heroine going to live? Because her hero was the brother. And then you and I wrote the sister stories. And so she was like, okay, now I need to find a house for my heroine to live in. And we drove around because there's this charming old, fun historic type houses area. And one was for sale. And she was like, oh, I think this is it. And then she went running up to the front door, and she's looking in the windows and taking all these photos. And it was just a hoot. And then we drove, and we realized it was just literally like a block and a half from where the siblings were living. So it was just perfect. It was such fun.
Such fun. Yeah. And we just are all World War II. Crazy about World War II. So and this, and then did you know, this will tie in with your story because blah blah blah. And it was like spouting all these facts about World War II. It
was so fun, and that's what makes writing collaboratively like that so much fun. Is you get that energy of all these ideas firing off of each other, and it's so much fun to write that way, because most of the time when you and I are writing, it's us and our ideas in front of the computer and going, okay, now what?
Yeah,
And
what? Yep.
there's really no one that you can talk to about it. It's all in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll go on a walk and I'll be like, okay, God, what's next? Because I'm kind of stuck or whatever. But it's a very kind of solitary. And so it was just such a joy to do Where Treetops Glisten and then having it set. And we used titles of different songs that came out during the war. And it was just too much fun.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah. Okay, so that was our first one. And then I was working on an Amish series. And I think I was also writing some other books at the same time. I'm like, okay, I could do more Amish books, but I need someone to help me because it's getting too much. And so then I brought you on for the Sugarcreek book, which are mysteries. And so there's
guideposts.
With guideposts. So that's hold it up again so we can see the title. That's blessed. I know. Blessed are the cheesemakers, because
and that one was so fun.
My friend Lisa, her parents own Heine cheese in it's
Sugarcreek.
It's Sugarcreek, but it's it's in Sugarcreek or is it in Berlin? Anyway, they own the cheese factory there. And so it's all about Amish people that make the cheese. And so we got to have a book about cheese and cheese cultures. And because her grandpa brought over cultures from Switzerland, and they still use the same cultures in their cheese making today. Yeah.
But and that was one of those things I was like, really? So if someone stole the cheese cultures, it would really be that big a deal? I was like,
that's a big deal.
It really would be.
It would really be. Yes. And so then here's another one, Mason Jar Mayhem. Is another one, which is so fun. They're doing a remodel, and all of a sudden they open it, and there's all this mason jars. And we had to figure out where it came from, and what's the mystery behind it. And we always kind of
filled with money, and so then who owns it? Who should it be turned over to? Finders keepers.
Yeah.
And then several of them we were able to actually. Then when we did the Martha's Vineyard series, tied in a lot of World War II, and that's kind of one of the hallmarks of when we write together. Even if it's a contemporary story, there's a World War II connection.
We could pull stuff into Amish. We could pull stuff into Martha's Vineyard, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
We
can pull it in just to the book itself.
Yeah,
and so
exactly. Yes. So
I guess if Kara Putman and Tricia Goyer are writing together, there will be a World War II tie of some sort, even if it's a contemporary novel.
Exactly. And you got to go with me to one of the reunions.
Yes.
To meet some of the veterans. And so,
that was such a gift. Yeah. And that was 2010. So, and that was one of their last reunions.
I think it was their last reunion. Yeah, that we got to go to.
And I just remember being there and going, pinch me, these are all my heroes.
I know.
And they were just so down to earth and so humble. I'm like, oh, we didn't do anything special. I'm like, oh, no, you did. You saved Western civilization. And part of what makes it so special is the fact that we were just doing the next right thing.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing just to sit and listen to their stories.
And talking to their sons and grandsons, and some of the people that had been saved by them were there. And we got to talk to, I think Mark he was born outside the gates of Mauthausen, and we got to talk to him. I mean, it's just amazing, the stories. And so I interviewed Cindy on here, Cindy Coloma, last week, which her and I started researching together. See, all my friends, we just kind of have these ties around World War II, and you have to love my veterans if you love me. So
that's right. And it was such a special thing because I was able to drive down and meet you there. And I think Alyssa was the newborn at the time. And so you had a friend who'd come up, and we were just all in this hotel room, and then we'd go hang out with the World War II veterans. And then it was just really a special time. It was.
It's just amazing that God has given us those gifts, because most of them have passed away now. And it's just that chance that we had to talk to them and spend time with them, and who knows how their stories are going to continue as we write future stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Because there's just even that. I remember asking one of the guys who was part of liberating Mauthausen. I think that was the one that they liberated. And it's like, so what's the thing that sticks with you the most? Now that at that point it was like 60 years after freeing it. And he was like, the smell. I'll never forget the smell. Yeah. Well, if I hadn't talked to him, I wouldn't know that would be the sensory element that would stick with him. Because I was like, I would think that what you saw, I would think maybe the sounds, but no, it was the smell. Yeah. And I just like, oh.
And they were still like ashes and bodies in the ovens, and Yeah, it would have been horrific. Yeah, and the piles of bodies, because they weren't, it was just horrible. Yeah, so hard stuff, but I think it's so important. That's why we write about this stuff, because we want people to remember. And I think, So I am listening to Flight Risk on Audible. I bought it on
Oh,
Audible. I mean, I have the book
okay.
here, but I'm telling
Yeah.
you, when I'm cooking dinner or folding laundry, it's so much easier. And I am
Yes.
loving it so much. And it's just so cool because your main character is an attorney, and I know you're
Yep.
an attorney. And
Mhm.
I'm like, this is stuff that it would take me forever to research, like all the
Yeah.
all the things that she knows and how things work. And I'm like, and Kara does this, so she just knows it. And I just love how you were
Yeah.
able to weave your personal life into your character's life. So tell us a little bit about that. Just about, I mean, what was it like being an attorney, writing about an attorney, and then the legal system, but you also make it's like super exciting and like, okay, I got to find out what happens. So it's a
Yeah.
legal book, but it's not like, okay, we're just going to be in a courtroom or whatever. So explain a little bit about flight risk and how you just brought it to life because of your own
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. So one of the things about my legals, at least so far, is that I haven't had one that's a straight courtroom drama. So it hasn't had, like, you think of some of Randy Singer's, who I love. He writes fantastic legal thrillers, or John Grisham. And a lot of those will be they're really focused on one case
Mm-hmm.
and very courtroom driven. Mine haven't been that way yet. At some point, I can definitely see writing something
Right.
that's more
Yeah.
focused on that. But this one is much more of, she's the mentor character from Hidden Justice, but she gets her own book and it's a standalone. So she's a little older. She's about 40.
I really like that. Yeah. And it was
Yeah.
good. Yeah. She has some life experience behind her. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's got some scars and she's got some wounds. And there's in some ways, there was a lot more I could do with her because she's lived longer. And so, but at the same time, she's this very successful and accomplished person. She's well known for what she does. And she's actually based on my law school mentor. So there's elements of me in her, and there's elements of Victoria Huber, who was the lady who got me through my first year of law school. And it was just fun to kind of go, okay, so what would it be like? You're this very successful attorney. You've been practicing for 15 years. She's got her own firm. She's an expert kind of in this patent small business law area. And then her personal life collides. And so you've got, just elements of like patent law and 9/11. There's kind of a thread of that. And what I didn't realize, because I was like, oh, this isn't an issue book, because my Hidden Justice books had an issue. And I realized, oh, wait a minute, there kind of is an issue here.
Yeah.
But it wasn't my intent at all,
Yeah.
because it has a kind of this little thread on human trafficking, but it was inspired by a real story about a real professional baseball player who in the off season would go and basically would be a fake John for these law enforcement agencies that were trying to find the traffickers. And so that becomes part of one of the layers that goes through the book. And so it was fun because these books have so much going on. And because of everything that's happening with her family on the personal side, there's just a lot.
Yeah.
She's got this niece, and it just, without giving it all away,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on in the book. And so I was going to say, I haven't quite pulled out, like with Sarah's novella and Where Treetops Glisten, she had the kid. And I was always like, I will always have a kid after that, because that's what everybody would comment on. And the niece isn't necessarily a kid, but she's 14 and she's got a lot going on. And Savannah's trying to be that mentor for her as well. And Savannah's kind of lost who she is because she's so focused on everyone else. And so this book gives her the excuse, the catalyst, where she has to work on her.
Yeah. And what I love, and so it's so funny because as a writer, when I see someone doing something so well, I'm like, oh. So even with the guy building, like with the woodworking and stuff, and it's just like symbolism. I saw so much symbolism there, and I don't know. It was just like stuff. I'm like, oh, this is so good.
And there were just those moments that I'm like, it really feels like, in a lot of ways, Flight Risk is the book where everything I've been working on for all these years came together. Because honestly, that woodworking is an NCIS kind of moment.
Yeah.
So if anybody watches NCIS, and Gibbs is always working on something in his basement, like a boat, or I think he only worked on that boat for like the first 10 seasons, and then it was something else after that. But it was that kind of, okay, I want him to have some kind of outlet, some kind of place where he goes to kind of, let loose or kind of relax. And then I was like, but what if that's his only connection to his history? and his history has a lot of pain in it. And so
that
I
ties
just,
into the story.
yeah, I mean, it was just like one of those where, I don't know, you probably get this way, but every once in a while I'll write something and be like, that was good. And
Yeah.
I've got goosebumps thinking about it because I'm like,
Yeah.
that was good. I don't think it came from me. It was just
Yeah.
everything coming together.
And then
So
when you see like, oh, this can go with this and this can go with this, and I'm only like 4 chapters in and I'm already clicking. Like it's already clicking to me like, oh, she's doing this layer and this. And so
yeah,
it's just fun. I just love it. And I love I love lots of books and I love reading my friends' books, but I'm like, okay, this is really good, Kara. I'm
thank
really
you.
enjoying this. So it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what was really fun is there's a guy who reads my books from Australia, and he's a hard reviewer, which I appreciate because he's really very thoughtful and very intentional about it.
Hmm.
But it'll be interesting to see what your reaction is to the end, because he was like, "Oh, the sizzle," I wish I'd written those last 2 pages. And after reading his review, I had to go back and go, "Oh, yeah, that is really good."
Oh, so fun. And that's so
Yeah.
fun. I love how you like know like different readers like, ooh, what is this reader gonna think of this? Or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's really fun too, is over time you kind of get a sense of there are these readers who just really engage and
Hmm.
interact with your books and with you. And it's so fun. And I learn a lot from them because I read voraciously. Like I just finished one of Lynette Eason's books and I immediately flipped into another one, and I'm listening to a book and I'm reading a book, and I realized the book I just started reading I'd already listened to, but I'm like, I don't know about you, but I love listening to books because it forces me to slow down because I read really fast. And so then I hear things that if I was just
Mm.
reading it, I fly past and I might miss. And so now I'm like, oh, but it'll be good to read it and see what pops out at me that way, because I'm always trying to go, okay, how can I be better? What's working? What's not working? So kind of like you were just saying, how you're like, I could
Yeah.
see this is clicking and clicking and clicking. It's hard just to read because I'm always like, okay, why is this working for me? Or why did I just disengage when that happened?
Okay, so I'm
Or,
totally opposite. I listen, and I listen to faster than I read because when
oh,
I read, I'm like studying paragraph style. Like I'm so like
that's so funny.
cerebral when I read that it takes me forever. I'm like, ah, that was a really good description. And then I'll like flip back and like see the build up to the. So I'm like, when I read, it's almost like I'm studying. And so
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I will listen to, in fact, there's a couple places I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back and read this in the book because I want to study how Kara did this. But when I listen, I'm just like listening to the story because I'm usually like, well, like I said, folding
Yeah.
laundry, or so I could just enjoy the story. But when I sit there and read, so I'm way slower reader, which is so funny because it's the opposite of you. I'm a way slower
Yeah.
reader because I'm like totally like picking apart different things when I'm reading. So it's so funny how we each
That
have a
is so
different way.
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think I mean, that's like the continuing ed that we did,
Mhm.
is basically saying everybody has their own way of doing it.
Mhm.
And there's not a right and there's not a wrong. Like the way you write would drive me absolutely batty because you write this scene and then you write that scene and then you write that one and then you write this one and then you pull them all together. And I write very linear.
Mhm.
Even when I'm pantsing and I don't have a detailed outline,
Mhm.
I still write very linear. But because I know you can craft these amazing books by going popcorn all over the
Yep.
place, when I get stuck on the last couple of books, I go, well, I know this scene has to happen. So instead of just staring at my computer, I'll go write that scene. And then maybe I'll get back to going, oh, this is how I get there. This is what I need to do. And I go back and fill it in.
Yeah.
So, and that's what's the beautiful thing about it, is there's not a right or a wrong way. But what I find is because I read so fast, when I'm going to study a book, I have to actually open a spreadsheet and go, okay, what's happening in this chapter?
Mm.
And really turn on the left brain analytical cerebral side, because otherwise I'm reading for pleasure and
Yeah.
I'm reading just to catch kind of the big things,
Yeah.
but not that super analytical.
Oh, that is so interesting how we're
Yeah.
completely different, but
Yeah.
it's cool. And I think it's
But
both.
it
It just
works.
shows you as readers and writers, we're doing both. Like we're still enjoying the story, but there's sometimes I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
wait, I want to go back and study this more, see how this happened, or it's like that part of the brain is always kind of working there too. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes I wish I could turn off the editor.
I know.
I
Oh,
really wish I could just sit and enjoy something. Like even for my fun right now, because classes are done, I get my line edit back today, and then I don't have a contract, so I've got time to kind of think and breathe. And so I'm like, I'm going to watch all 24 of the Marvel movies in order, and I'm going to take notes on the character arc.
oh my gosh, that's
And so I have
awesome.
a notebook where I'm literally
That is
doing that. And I was
awesome.
like, oh, I need to capture that because there's the theme and one line of dialogue. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
I need to get a couple of the scripts and go through because this dialogue just zings and I need to
Mhm.
study the dialogue in a couple of these. And I'm like, I am such
I
a
know. It's
left
so
brain
well.
watcher and reader.
Yeah, I've never read The Hunger Games, and we just watched with the teen girls. We've been watching them, and we just finished the last one last night, the movie. And I'm like, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And my daughter's like, how do you know? They've read the books. They know I haven't read the books. And I'm like, because it's been set up for the last three movies of exactly what's going to happen. I mean, as a writer, like, okay, this was totally set up. This was the
Yeah.
setup. And we could kind of see those points. And so I could say, as the movie's halfway over the last one, I'm like, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, because you
Yeah.
just know things are set up a certain way.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because there's that structure, and
Hmm.
and that was the thing I actually loved about Endgame. So when I first started watching the Marvel movies, I didn't watch them in order. I just watched them as they came out, and it didn't make any sense. I mean, I despised Tony Stark. I
I've never
despised the
watched
Iron
any
Man
of them.
movies.
I fall asleep in every
Oh,
single one of them.
oh my gosh,
That's my
they're
big
so good.
confession. Yeah.
But with Endgame, there was all this backshadowing. There was
Mm.
all these great little nuggets and drops that if you'd followed along. And so I've watched the movie several times to kind of pick up on all of those and to see the completion of the character arcs. And now I'm going back and intentionally
Oh,
watching
good.
them
Yeah.
all in sequence to see how they're building it, because that's really what we're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
you can love a plot, but if you don't care about the characters,
Hmm.
you're not going to stick with it. So there
Right.
has to be this blending of plot. Even women's fiction has plots. And,
Hmm.
to me, there are only a couple women's fiction authors that I'll read their books because I'm like, it's so angsty and it's so emotion driven. I'm just like, ugh, life is heavy enough. I don't
Yeah.
need to read
Yeah.
books that are that heavy. But like the very last one that just released from Beth Vogt, beautiful story,
Oh, wow.
amazing character arc. She took a sister that in the first book none of us liked and made her so human, and I was rooting for her so hard. And like, there's a lot to study in that, and to see,
Mm.
okay, how can you do this where you take someone who's just really unlikable to then understand what's going on, what was that dark moment that made her who she is today, and how does that get resolved? And so I don't know,
Oh,
it's just
good.
kind of
Okay, so
fun.
what's the name of that series? Because I have not read it.
It's the Thatcher sisters.
Okay, the Thatcher sisters.
So, yeah, and it's Beth Vogt's latest series. It's the one she does with Tyndale, and it's wonderful. And I've enjoyed the first two, but this last one just made me go, oh, I feel it all. And I think it's
Mm.
because the character was just so almost unlikable in the first two books. And now it's like, oh, but I understand why. I
Yeah,
understand why she
exactly.
was that way. And so that makes me want to root for her and
That'd be
see
interesting to
healing.
talk to Beth if she intended that at the beginning, like if that's where she was going with the.
Well, and it was one of the things that she said was really challenging, is because the sister from the first book is set up to be so unlikable.
Mhm,
She's
mhm,
just so demanding. She's firstborn to an extreme
mhm,
and just demanding and doesn't need anybody and knows what's best for everybody and all of that. And then you realize there's this moment that happened when she was like 10 that affected the whole way she sees the world. And I could resonate with that because I think most of
mhm,
us have that moment where
mhm.
we're like, whether or not we've really thought about it and keyed into it, we're like, that's the moment that defined who I
Yeah.
was or how I think the world sees me. And so I've played that part ever since.
Wow. And
And
that,
then
yeah,
as adults, we spend time unwinding that and getting back to who God says we are.
exactly. Oh, that's good. That's some preaching right there. That's
I know. And that was
Yeah, that was
free.
great. I love that. Oh, so good. Okay. So, and it made me think of like when you're talking about just the setup and your planning and your thinking in the series. So, when we wrote the series that we're part of, they tell us who the characters are. And
Yeah.
they tell us, like, okay, this is the characters. We get to come with the plot. But then you have other writers that are writing the same characters. And I think that's been the fun and unique part, because we are stepping into characters that someone else created, but then how do we breathe life into them? And I think that's why we bring in like a World War II thread in this one. It has the World War II veteran goes missing on her 100th birthday party. It was just like Congressional Medal of Honor. Oh, the Medal of Honor for the veteran goes missing. But it's like so fun because we bring in these elements, and I think that's even with books that may be like a series where someone else has the characters, like Guidepost says, but it's like you're breathing life, you things that you get excited about, that you love, and it just brings this freshness to these characters, which is so fun.
It is. And I think that's where, even in a setting like that, we all have our own unique voice. And I remember when I was first writing for Guidepost on a different series, and I was like, okay, so how do I make sure the voice is the same? And like, oh, don't worry about it. You just write it your way. And I'm like, but these are characters that are carrying over from book to book with all these different authors. Don't we have to have the same voice? And they're like, no, readers don't care. And I was like, that seems so weird to me. But then I realized readers really don't care. They just want a good story. And because so much of it is kind of prescribed, you get a series Bible and you're going back to it. And so you can keep things kind of consistent. But it really is, every author has their own way of saying things. And what has really been fun is when you and I write together, it's seamless. You can't tell where one person wrote and the other didn't. Because our process just works. So that's always been kind of fun to see.
It's super fun because we'll outline it all the way through, especially the mysteries are fun because, you always think of like, okay, what are the rabbit trails or the red herrings and this and that, and the turning, all those different things. And then I'll be like, okay, I write chapter 1 through 3, you read chapter 4 through 6, and people think we're crazy, but literally, and then we will like box back and forth our textbook for, actually, I made this one day later. So when you change this, make sure it's Friday. We do these little things, but overall, kind of the story arc, the mystery part, that stays the same. It's maybe the little tweaks. And then when we edit each other stuff, I'm like reading, I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote this part. Oh wait, Kara wrote this part. It's like, it was super fun. Yeah.
And that was something that was like, I'm not quite sure how this will work. And yet it did. It worked really, really well. So that was just kind of one of those fun little blessings.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, because we write kind of different, but somehow in those series, like our voices kind of just matched ever. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was fun.
But I think it was partly too because I'd write and you'd edit what I wrote, and then you'd write and I'd edit what you wrote, and then someone would do the final edit. And in that process, we just kind of smoothed out all the edges and it became seamless. And we really are, because someone just dropped a comment, that we have a great writing relationship, and we really do. And that's just it's made it so much fun because we've written 8 books together, probably.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's been quite a few.
It's been a number.
I just know that one series we wrote the end 3 times.
Because they kept extending the series. Yeah.
And each time we would write the end. And then the last time I wrote it, and it was just me, and it was like, I wonder if this is really the end, or if they're going to add another 6 books or whatever.
Yeah, but that series, the Sugarcreek series has sold so well, and that's been super fun.
Yeah.
So that's great. Yeah. And I love, and as we're doing this, I'm like, Karen and I do really need to brainstorm.
Yes. Wouldn't it be so fun to do that again?
Yeah, it would.
Because we do. We write really well together. Yeah, so that would be fun.
It. And even different ideas. You've gotten on the phone with me and asked me questions. I've gotten on the phone with you, like about our own books that we're reading. I know when you were doing the Monuments Men, I think we were at the World War II reunion when we were talking about the Monuments Men. And then just different stuff is fun. It's like, okay. And then I know I was able to give you some connections for the book that I think was it the one you're editing now?
Lethal Intent. Yeah. So, and here's one of the challenges when you're writing legal books. So the book that comes out in January, Carolyn and Brandon have kind of been set up for their own book since book 2. So since Imperfect Justice, but definitely since Delayed Justice, that their story was coming. And so Brandon's got this group, foster home. And actually, I was like, I need another idea for a hero. And you were like, well, what about somebody who does something like this? And so that's how I got the whole even backstory for Brandon. But because their story kind of kept getting pushed off, the law changed.
I know. Yeah.
And so I got to where it was finally going to write there. So I'm like, this is going to be easy. I know these characters well. I've been waiting to write their book. And then the law changed. And I was like, can he even have a group foster home anymore?
Yeah.
And then because of the way the law goes, you might get a law, but you don't get regulations till like a year or two later. And they're in Virginia, and Virginia still hasn't issued their regulations under the federal law that was passed in 2018. And so I'm writing for a book that's coming out in January, where the regulations are supposed to come out in July for a law that passed 2 years ago. And I was just ready to go, So, but yeah, you connected me with someone in Arkansas who runs a home like that, which was great, because after talking with him, it was fun, because what he's doing is actually what I've been thinking. Well, maybe I can have Brandon do this, and maybe that would solve the issue with the law so that he can still have Almost Home, because he has to have Almost Home, because that's been the setup for like 3 books now. But I was just like, oh, I think I'm going to pull my hair out trying to figure this out.
That I don't want to write legal stuff, Kara. I'm just telling you right now. I don't want to write legal stuff.
And it was one of those, I was like, oh, this will be easy. We've had group foster homes for 100 years. Nothing's going to change. And then they completely changed the law in 2018 to where now it can only be trauma-informed care. Well, that's not what he's doing.
Right.
Listen to me talk to him as if he's real.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that doesn't work. Yeah. That totally is a model that doesn't work for him. And so it was just crazy and stressful. And I think we got it where it works, but oh my word.
And now you're doing line edits. So you're getting them back today?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we went through the macro. And so the macro was, that's where you do the real story stuff, anything that's not working. And what I find is I end up in the draft I turn in, I tend to, with these legal books, have a lot of introspection on the part of the hero and the heroine. And then Erin Healy's been my editor on these last 2. And she's like, okay, Kara, now time to turn this into showing, not telling. And so then I have to take, a couple of pages of them thinking about something and create a scene around it, which makes the story so much stronger. But I wish I could get there a little faster, because I probably wrote 40,000 brand new words on the macro edit, and then the line edit will be much simpler. But yeah, it's a process to get to the book.
Though, because of the legal stuff, you have to be introspective. It has to be cerebral and what works. And it's not just this happens and this happens. Like, legally, can that happen? Or legally, what's gonna, mean, there's a lot going on. Yeah.
Well, and that's where having Savannah's law firm, where there's a couple of attorneys, so that you can actually turn it into a scene, like how her story opens, where Emily's there and they're having this conversation about the patent case, and then it kicks off, because I think originally I had that where she was sitting at her desk thinking it all out.
Oh, okay.
And then I was like, okay, well, if I make it a conversation, all that same information's still getting out, but now it's dynamic, instead of her sitting staring at her computer going, huh. What now?
Which is what you're usually doing, though, huh? Right?
Exactly.
Okay, so you mentioned being an attorney, and then also you teach. So let's talk a little bit about that, because you have like a lot going on, girl.
Yeah. So I teach full time at Purdue University. And so it's been kind of this evolution, because when I started writing in 2005, I started teaching that next year, where I had like 1 class in the summer. And then over the last few years, it's taken off. And so I got to where I was teaching every semester. And now for the last 4 years, I've been full time. And I love it. I feel like I get to do the 2 things I was created to do, write and teach. Yeah. And it was actually one of the things that was really hard this semester is at spring break, everything got transitioned online. Yeah. And so right at the time I was getting my macro edit back, I was having to switch my face-to-face teaching into online instruction. The good thing is I was down to 2 classes, because I've had semesters where I had 5 or 6 classes I was teaching, and each had like 12 and 22 students, whereas I've had semesters where I've had like 200. So knock on wood, it was a good semester to have to go online, but it's just not the same. Yeah. It's not the same energy and everything. And so it was a lot of transition, but I love it. I teach law, I teach ethics, And I get to work with some of the top business students literally from around the world at a major university. And so it's really awesome.
I love it. And I think, I mean, you're the perfect person to be connecting with them because you're just a relational person anyway. So I bet it was hard going online. And my son, so he's a junior. So my daughter, who's in junior college, was already doing her classes online. But my son, who was a junior, was at the University of Arkansas. Yeah. And it was like basically don't come in tomorrow to the classes.
Yeah.
And by Monday, we'll have it figured out. And so some of his classes transitioned well. Some have been hard because these are teachers that have been there a while, that have never taught online, and suddenly they're recording lectures and trying to post them. And it was really hard for some teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it was one of the things that fortunately over the last 3 or 4 years, I've been creating a lot of like review videos and study guides and things like that. But one of the classes I've only taught 3 times, and it had always been face-to-face. So there were 2 mornings where I went in, and in an hour and a half, I would record 6 mini videos, and then I'd post them up. But because the system was so inundated, because we had every professor was now trying to do things like that, I couldn't even get stuff to upload. So I would then have to download it to my computer and upload it to YouTube, and then put it into the learning management system.
Oh, wow.
And, just all these things that aren't ideal. But fortunately, I was tech savvy enough. I could figure out workarounds until the system caught up. But it's just not the same. And our dean was very early in the process where our college had actually been pushing the university of, we've got to have a plan. We've got to have a plan. This is coming. But we found out on a Monday before spring break started the following Monday. And by Wednesday, everybody was like, you're not coming back at least until March 30th. And then very quickly it was, you're not coming back for the semester. Right now, it looks like we'll be back in the fall.
Okay.
So again, our dean's part of the process of how do we come back safely? And so I'm like, thank you, Jesus, because it's just not as much fun to teach this way. And so I can do it, but the relational piece is just huge. And like our students were supposed to come here, my undergrads, because we always have the students over at our house. And they were like, are we still going to do that? Can we do it in the fall? And I was like, I hope so. I really hope so. Because we love having them at our house. And it's hard when all of a sudden.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you're such a relational person that it's not just the students and you're just giving them information. And especially my daughter has had a couple professors like that are just, they still communicate. One of her professors comments almost on everything in Facebook that she's connected. It's just like neat. You do build relationships with special people. So I know that's hard.
Yeah, it is. And and then trying to, one of the other things that was challenging was helping the students through the grief too of, I had students who were graduating. I had students who had to go home to Saudi Arabia or India or South Korea or wherever. And all of a sudden things didn't look like they were supposed to. It helped a little that our oldest is a sophomore. So she came home, and then our other 4, I have kids in all 4 levels of school right now. And so they were all coming home at the same time. And my husband and I were coming home to work at the same time. But just even helping my students go, okay, this isn't the way any of us imagined this would be. You're probably okay. Even if you got COVID, you would probably be okay. But there are a lot of people on campus who wouldn't be okay. And I'm not worried, but it's okay to be sad and to be upset and disappointed. But at the same time, now let's move on. We got to kind of keep trucking. And so let's see, we've got a comment on the editing process. Nonfiction is about fact checking and clarifying besides correcting grammar and spelling mistakes. And that's so important. Now, Tricia writes a whole bunch more nonfiction than I do. I've written 1, but it is that fact checking and stuff becomes really important. And actually, even on the fiction side, it's so important because you get one fact wrong and it'll pull the reader out of the story, and that's all you'll hear from them. They won't care about everything else that you got right. It's that one thing that you didn't do right. I spend so much time on Google Maps, or, like when I wrote Shadow by Grace, the Monuments Men book, I had a stack of research that was so tall. And if anyone tried to challenge me on it, I could be like, no, here's where I got that from.
And someone always knows. Someone always knows.
Or they think they know.
Or they think they know. That's true.
And so, and I've had that with editors. I got to where with my World War II, I would drop footnotes as I was going.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where this information came from. So I could even just kind of get around the whole, well, that's not right. I'd be like, yeah, here's why it is right.
Yeah.
I've done my work. And so just to even validate what I was saying, I'd be like, this is from this page in this book, or this is from this link on this website. And it saved a lot of time in edits then of, well, that can't be right. I'm like, well, yeah, it is. Check the link.
Yeah, exactly. It is. And it's so funny because, okay, so I wrote some World War II with Mike Yorkie, and one of the main characters is a German scientist. So you have some language stuff that we're kind of add in flavor, but he's a scientist. So he was like putting theories and theorems and stuff on the board, and our editor, Vicki Crumpton, found someone to make up a whatever thing, a theory that they could put up that would actually work as like this whole mathematician person. I'm like, that's like going above and beyond, because I've been like not having a real theorem up there, but no, it's like a real thing in the book. A mathematician checked it. It really works. It was a thing they were working on in Germany with the science department. It's like, you never know when you're just like throwing a scene in here. You're like, okay, this is going to take a lot of time to figure this thing out. But it ended up being important to who he was and the war and what they were doing and all the secret stuff going on and spies. And so you needed to have a real theorem there. I don't know if you use the right word now. That was like 20 books ago. But anyway, but it's important to have those things, because the book, I mean, if they can't believe one part, then the whole, that's what it is. Yeah.
It destroys your credibility. And that's where, and I love John Grisham's books. My husband actually just got me one of his new ones last night, or for Mother's Day, because I'm so far behind. But I was like, okay, I might have a little time this summer to actually catch up and do some reading like that. And it was really interesting though, because there's one of his books that was set in DC. I don't even remember the name of it. But I remember reading it because we had lived in DC for 8 years. That's one of the reasons Flight Risk and those legal thrillers are set in the DC area, because I know it, because we lived there. And I know it. And I kept going, this doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah.
This thing he wrote about, it's not there. And because I knew DC, that just shot his credibility. And I went to the author notes and he was like, yeah, I don't care about that. I know some of you really, and he's like, this is fiction. I don't have to do that. And I was like, oh, buddy.
Yeah.
And that's not what I want to do. There are times where you have to create things. Like in Lethal Intent, the book that comes out in January, I'm doing some stuff with CAR T cells. So Flight Risk has kind of this journalism ethics thread. How do we find truth in a fake news world? And then Lethal Intent is almost more medical ethics and kind of colliding with the law. And so I have a friend whose son had gone through 3 or 4 different bouts of leukemia and had been part of 2 advanced trials. And so sat down at Panera with my friend and then the oncology doctor who had overseen her son's treatment. And so I don't have it anymore, but my wall over here was just covered with notes on CAR T cells and now analogous treatments. And I had to become a cancer expert.
Right, yeah.
But then it was really helpful, because then when Erin was saying, well, this can't be right, I'm like, well, yeah, actually, here's the snapshot of the drawing that the oncology doctor, who actually was a teaching physician at the major university here, this is how she described it to me.
Yeah.
And so, but it was because I know enough people will have lived through that, that I want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah.
I want to honor their experience, even when I'm playing on the edges of it and going, but I'm going to play with, this is what CAR T cells can do today. And this is going to be sort of like that, but a little different. But the experience is real. The experience is the same. I'm just extending science a little bit, but grounding it in real stuff, talking about HeLa cells, having read books on HeLa cells. And there are lots of reasons I went to law school and not medical school.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest.
But then you're becoming an expert in it. So
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, let me tell you about HeLa cells.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about all the ethical issues that are related to the HeLa cells and Henrietta Lacks and all of that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's almost like we get to live all these different lives. And so I know, like, even when I write my Amish books, and when we write our Amish books together, I'll have friends who either grew up Amish or have lived near Amish communities read some scenes. Like, did we get this right? Did we check this?
Yeah.
My friend who has the cheese factory, she read our book to make sure we got the cheese facts right with all the cultures and stuff. And
exactly.
and then when the veterans were still alive, when I wrote those books, I had them read it. And they're like, yep, you got it. It's just like you need that to have to know that you are, it truly is honoring the people who are doing the work, who are living these lives. And I think that's that's why I'm loving your book, because I'm like, oh, I know when she's throwing around these attorney terms, those are real attorney terms. This is real stuff that's happening.
Yeah. Well, and like Delayed Justice was the book prior to Lethal Intent, Flight Risk.
Let me grab, wait. I got the little Kara shelf.
Yay!
So I was pulling Cindy's off the other day too. Okay, so we have Beyond Justice here.
Yeah, Beyond Justice.
Imperfect Justice.
Imperfect Justice. Yeah.
Delayed Justice.
And so Delayed Justice is my childhood sexual abuse book. So nice, heavy topic. It was like, ooh, it was a hard one because I wanted to really honor that experience. But one of the things I did is after we got through macro edits, I had 2 people read the book who work intimately with abuse survivors to go, is this real? Is it honoring? Is it, I also was really careful about how do I let people know who shouldn't read this book? I don't want it to be a trigger for them. And it's been so sweet. The people who've written me and said that book was actually helped me heal.
Wow.
It helped me see that there is a way to the other side, because that's what I wanted to do. And so with Lethal Intent, once we're through line edits and the book's 90% of the way there, then I'll send it to my friend and to the oncology doctor and go, okay, did I get it right? Is there anything I got wrong that I need to fix at the galley stage? Because I want to make sure that I've gotten it right and that it's as right as it can be. And any errors are always mine.
Yeah.
But, there's this, I think it's really important when we're writing these stories that are grounded in truth, like Imperfect Justice, it's about domestic violence. The church is incredibly blind to domestic violence that happens all around us. And I'd walked my cousin and a good friend in DC through it. Plus I had done a bunch of domestic violence cases through the WCA domestic violence shelter here in town. So I had all that experiential knowledge to bring to it. It was a book. I was like, it has to be written. And then, the childhood sexual abuse one, it was not fun putting myself in the position of what would a 28-year-old who was abused as an 8-year-old, how would that affect her today, and having to live in that space for a while. But it was important. Yeah. And so it's, in a lot of ways, Flight Risk was an easier one to write because we're dealing with different stuff, and it's still heavy, but it's not heavy in the same way.
Right. Yeah.
Delayed Justice was just, but you know what? Even with Delayed Justice, I was able to use animals to help with telling the story and kind of bringing some light and some fun moments to it. So there are ways that you can even balance when you've got a kind of heavy underlying thread. There are still ways that you can give the reader a chance to go, whew, okay, now we can deal with this. Yeah. And even using Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe as part of the spiritual thread was really kind of fun. But it was a way to kind of bring a little lift to what could have been a very heavy story.
Exactly. And I think these books are so important. Like you said, people maybe who haven't lived through it can understand it better. Or if they have, I love how you said they can bring healing to them and to see. And I think it was just even so amazing with even the World War II veterans for them to hold the book in their hands and like, okay, I will be remembered, or our story will be remembered. Yes. It's like so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why what we do as novelists actually matters. Like when I was writing Shadowed by Grace, which was my Monuments Men book, the reason I was doing it is I had discovered Robert Edsall's Monuments Men book at our library. And I went, this is a fascinating part of the history of World War II that nobody knows about. And there are a whole bunch of people who will never work their way through that thick nonfiction book, but will read a novel. And so, it was really important to me to get all the details right, because I knew in a sense it was a trust that I'm the one they're going to get their history from. And so, there was a book that had been written by one of the Monuments Men who'd been in Italy that, because I'm at a major university, I was able to get the actual book from 1951 Princeton University and have it for 3 months. And so it was important to track that down. I was really glad I didn't have to spend $200 to get it on a rare book site. But, I would have, because I needed to get that information right. And so
I love it.
It is all of it's a trust.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so many good stuff. We need to write something together. Just
Yes,
talking with
we
you, I'm like,
do.
oh my goodness, we need to do this again. It's so
Yeah,
fun. Okay,
it would be so fun.
so flight risk, I am enjoying it. This is gonna put it up here one more time. And then I'm really enjoying the Audible book of it too. And I think that if you like to listen to books, it's a good one to listen to. There's some that I'm like, okay, I don't know the
Yeah,
narrator stuff, but flight risk, she's doing a really good job with it.
that's
So
awesome.
yeah, so thank you so much, Kara, for being here, for sharing your stories, for sharing your heart, and just for just
Yeah,
the diligence you put into your writing. I know it matters to me as a reader, and it matters to other readers out there. Okay, before we go,
yeah,
you mentioned Beth. What are some other like authors that you recommend? Maybe someone's just getting started in Christian fiction that you
yeah.
would like point them to.
So that's a great question. So if you love women's fiction, definitely Beth Vogt, Vogt. She is fantastic. If you like contemporary romance, Denise Hunter and Becky Wade are both my go-to. And I don't like straight romance, but I love their books. There's so much more
Mm-hmm,
to them.
mm-hmm.
If it's suspense, Randy Singer is unmatched. I aspire to be like Randy when it comes to all the threads and layers that he puts into his legal thrillers. I just finished Lynette Eason's, one of hers. I love her suspense. Colleen Coble's great. When it comes to historical, if you like cowboys, I love Karen Whitmire and Regina Jennings. They always make me laugh as I'm reading. And so when I just need a chance to kind of breathe and some light, just good fiction, I love theirs. They're usually set kind of in cowboy territory in like the 1880s. They're a lot of fun. Jen Toronto, Gilded Age, fantastic. Some people say they're like way over the top, but that's why I love them. Her sense of humor is wonderful. And so whenever I know I just want to laugh, I grab one of hers. Let's see.
Those are some good ones.
Yeah. And then Regency, I'd be like, I like Christy Ann Hunter and Sarah Sundin.
I haven't heard Christy Ann Hunter. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I have not.
So she has, yeah. And someone just said they need to try Randy Singer. Yes, you do. He's fantastic. So Christy Ann Hunter has a series that's set in England during kind of Regency times, Jane Austen, and really, really enjoy those. Sarah Sundin's are good. Her last series has had underlying mysteries, and they've been set in different kind of at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So the collision between the beginning of having factories and doing things the old way. And so kind of that collision point in different industries. So that's been really interesting. So yeah, I love books where I feel like I'm learning a little something at the same time.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And I think fiction readers are the most intelligent people because you're living all these lives. Just like writers, we get to experience it as we're writing it, but you're experiencing stuff, you're living stuff, and yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So those would be some that I would say they always jump to the top of my pile. Rachel Dillon is another one who writes legal suspense, and those are really good. And then I've got lots of people over here that I'm getting ready to read. If you like women's fiction, another one that's really good is Catherine Ray, Reay.
Oh, yeah.
I've enjoyed several of her books quite a bit. And hers are all over the board. They're very much standalone. There's no connection between them. And so if you like that, where you're going to read one book and then you don't have to worry about keeping track of characters and things like that, hers are really wonderful.
Yeah.
So I love reading broadly so that even if you don't like my books, I can help you find an author that you will like.
Kara, I like this. You can tag her in avid readers. She will let you know.
And I'm on Goodreads. And so like at this point in the year, I think I'm at 46 books so far this year. And so you can always pop on Goodreads and look at my, reading challenges from 2018, 19, and 20, and you'll get a good sense of what I like. And when I put a book in there, I always say why I liked it or maybe why I didn't, so that it can give you a good sense. Because I do read some ABA, so some non-Christian. Like there was one I just read that was highly recommended and wonderful, but I can't recommend it to Christian readers because I was just like, there were some very unnecessary things that I'm like, I don't care that everything else is great. Yeah. That part just kind of ruined the book for me recommending it.
Yeah, that's me too. So. And there's some that I tried. I'm like, if they just had a spiritual thread around this, it would be so good. Again, I'm writing as I'm in my mind reading.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
Well,
yeah,
awesome. Well,
those are some of them.
yeah, great recommendations. And thank you so much for being here. And I just love you, friend. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it was so fun to connect. Thanks so much for having me.
Yep.